gentlemen, here we are with another exciting episode of the Scouser and the Scot.
Today, we've got a fellow Blue, a legend in the music scene for us. We all know him, we all love him. Guy Bellamy from Great Music Stories. How the hell are you doing? And before you do anything, I want the xylophone entrance, please.
Okay, well, I thought I might play a little bit of Battle Hymn by Unknown Refuge,
Cool.
but redone in D sharp major. That's all you're getting for now. Sorry.
I thought it was going to, I was waiting on the, and today, ladies and gentlemen, instead of the Olympic-sized swimming pool, we'll be having the knobbly knees competition.
I tell you what, if your listeners are listening at the end, we'll play a bit more. But anyway, lovely to see you both. Lovely to see you both.
Yeah, good. How are you keeping anyway, buddy?
Yeah.
You keeping well?
Okay, you know, it's funny. It's funny. I was thinking, I think everyone, I think all your viewers will probably be in the same place. I was just thinking the other day, okay, we got Christmas and then we've got this, and this. And I thought, crikey, then it's 2 years of COVID. It's just, it's always been like 6 months or a year. But to think that we've all of us got through, this thing's gone on for 2 years.
Yeah, scary.
Yeah.
And do you know what? It's things like this though, where, and it's one of the reasons why we've done the show. It's your shows on the Friday night where it keeps everyone entertained and stuff like that, that has got us through COVID. So from my perspective, thank you very much. We appreciate everything that you've done definitely for the music scene. And as I say, keeping everyone entertained on a Friday night, it's just quality, mate. So
well, thank you. But there wouldn't be a show without the bands. Every week, bands putting their hands up, and you know, big bands like Steve Lucas has done a few, and Unknown Refuge have been a sensation with us this year. You know, without bands wanting to put their hand up, and as you do on your podcast, chat to listeners and brighten their day, the fans, there wouldn't be a show. So it all goes back to the bands.
I think as well, I think you're doing yourself with this service because you also have to have the passion and the desire to share that, because there's a lot of people that so-called in the scene and they're quite passive. And I think it takes somebody like yourself that goes out there and drives it and champions what I actually believe in. I mean, I'm 60, so I've been around for more or less the start of rock, or heavy rock. And I would say that the music nowadays and the bands nowadays are as good, or if not better, than I've ever seen. It's just our scene is too small for them. Yeah, and it needs to be expanded. Agree. So all the stuff that you do, mate, that's what's needed to try and smash that glass ceiling. You know.
But the thing is, I remember when I started doing my little Friday thing, I was on a little community station, and it's just a bit of fun. I took my daughter to the doctor's surgery, and there's an ad in the local community rag for a community station. And I'd done this in my 20s. I thought that'd be a giggle, need a hobby. So I actually did the business show, would you believe? Not without a xylophone. And then the guy who was the MD there was a former BBC producer, and he said, your interviews are different. You should do it on music. So my first interview was actually, would you believe, in the deep end with Steve Lucas. So I didn't even know how to hold a microphone. The manager, the PR said, yeah. But then what started was, and Craig, to your point, sorry, Shaggy Dog's story, but to your point, I then did an interview. I did the Choir Boys was my third interview, and then I met Terry, who's now at RPM, and through them I got introduced to Texas Flood and 13 Stars. And I think this is the story a lot of music fans will resonate with. You think, oh, it's a couple of new bands, but as you start digging deeper, every time you dig something deeper, you find another 5 bands, and they're great. And then this has been, and I think this has been probably for the three of us and many other people on the scene, the thing that gives us all the fight is the scale and the breadth and the quality of bands on the scene in this country. You've got to fight for them. This, you know, it's not a scene with 2 or 3 bands. There's hundreds of them, and the bands are too good to be passed over just because mainstream media won't play them. So we've all got to fight for them, and I think that's why the three of us are here tonight, and why, with all the things and all the other people on the scene doing their thing, it's why we all want to put a shift in, because ultimately the bands are that good. It would be a crime for their music to go unnoticed by people. You know?
You're absolutely right, because I mean, as you know, my business is the music business, which is in management, promotion, etc. But the reason why I started doing my radio show, grassroots radio, Hot from the Forge, was purely and simply because the same reason as you. Every week I get blown away. Every week I get more music. I find more music. And you know what's funny? What I love finding a band and it's got a genre. And you go, that's great. And then you start looking more into that type of music. And you find another 5, 10. There's fucking brilliant. There's hundreds of them, and it's every week I sit here and I record this and I think, that's another brilliant show because the music is just, and I very rarely play the same song twice. And I don't run, and it's a 2-hour show and I don't run out of music. So everything you're saying is right. It's just, we need
you can't fit it in, Craig, can you?
No, you can't. No.
You start with this thing, I'm going to play all these, and you get to that and you think the time's up. And it's like, you just can't fit in. But that is, I think, for all of us. And I think it's the same for some of these amazing fans. We know many of them that go to gigs and go out on a wet Thursday night and travel half the length of the country to see a band.
Oh, yeah.
I think all of us, whatever we do to support bands, it's because we believe in the quality. And I think that's a brilliant thing. I think, we all have days where we think, oh my God, it's another show or another podcast or another gig, but we keep going back because there's belief in the music. It all starts with the music for me.
Yeah.
Which is a great way to ask you.
All right.
What bands did you actually start with? What was your first taste in music and you thought, shit, I want to do this. I want to listen to this. I want to get involved in music.
It's going to be a really, you're going to expect me to say Bauhaus or something completely weird. I was Mr. Mainstream as a kid, but it's quite topical given the anniversary that happened yesterday. The band that blew me away was Queen when I was 9.
Still the best frontman in history.
Yeah, I got my brother, so my school friend lent me, well, it's always the way, isn't it? Queen Greatest Hits in about 1983 or 82, I was 11. And I played that record solidly alongside, I think, the Aristocats and Glenn Miller or whatever my mum gave me. But I played that Greatest Hits all summer. And then for my birthday in September, I think I was 10 or something, or 11, my brother bought me Jazz. And that was, for me, it was always a very fond album. And the thing about Queen now, because they're huge now, my girls like them. But I remember being a teenager, is they weren't a cool band to like.
No.
And all my friends were into New Romantics or Joy Division or Goths or the Metalers. And I like Queen, and people thought, oh, that's just cod opera. And it's like, no. But for me, it's always been about the songs. And again, with Live Aid, a lot of people don't realise, that kids who weren't alive at the time, is they were a late addition at the bill, and as a result, there weren't many Queen fans at Wembley. It's mostly U2 and other fans, and they blew the place apart. And I think Live Aid was the day, I remember watching it with my friends, where a lot of cool kids into other music thought, actually, this band's absolutely brilliant. And
at that time, you remember, Guy, at that time, for quite a few years before it, nobody was bothering with them. Mm-hmm. They really reintroduced themselves at Live Aid.
It was the Bill and Ted moment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Where everyone around the world
went, oh my God,
what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Why haven't I been told about Queen? And like, don't get me wrong, as you say, they weren't cool.
Yeah.
They weren't the band to follow. But as you say, all of a sudden, just after Live Aid, it was the Bill and Ted moment where everyone was just focused in singing along to Queen songs. Because
you got to remember that I'm old enough. I was there like when they first started coming out. So I'm, I was 73, 74. So I was 12, 13.
When they were a proper heavy band.
When they were a proper heavy band, and it was Fuck of the Wrist, and it was all that stuff, and Sheer Heart Attack, and I loved them then. I wasn't so keen on the later stuff. And then Hammer to Fall came out. I liked that. But the thing I didn't like I had a few of their albums, but I didn't like their early albums were what I loved. And I must admit, when they came on Live Aid, it was suddenly when I went, me, I'd forgotten how fucking brilliant they are.
Yeah.
And that was me. And I'd been there from the start. I can even remember Smile.
Yeah. Well, I don't think I was born then. If I was about 2. But no, but the funny thing with that is, the journey I've been on is I probably had a phase after my 20s where I stopped listening to them and stuff. But it's funny, and and Ian, you're too young. You're only 25, but Craig and I are at an age. But you know, now when you go through that cycle where you become a dad and your kids grow up, and I've got like a 17-year-old and 12-year-old now, and I think my daughter is a bigger Queen fan than I am, and that's you know, when you look at the Beatles and Zeppelin and Janis Joplin or Elvis, whoever the bless you, whoever the true greats are, when you see a band you like permeating across generations of your family, then you know it's a great band. You know,
yeah, it's a legacy. That's when you know they're a legacy, because you're right. Because I remember some of my daughters, like in the night, probably be the noughties, and all of a sudden I hear the two of them and they're singing, they're listening to AC/DC. I'm like, what are you listening to AC/DC for? And it's because the Iron Man movie had come out. They'd heard it, and then next thing I knew, they're singing Journey, and I'm like, where are you hearing that from? And that was Glee. You know, and all of a sudden they're going back and finding the originals and going, how cool is this? You know,
as long as they find it, Craig, as long as they find it. And you know, and I actually have a confession for me. We've all had them in lockdown, but the first lockdown, with my youngest daughter as a family, we watched the first couple of series of Glee again, because it's sort of family viewing, different ages, and you think, oh, but taking, you know, it's like early evening TV. But exactly to your point, the number of songs that my youngest daughter that TV show was a gateway for her discovering, you know, whether it was the Beatles or Madonna or whatever, but just hearing songs, and whether it's now computer games or whatever the form is. If young people see that as a gateway to go back and listen to originals of great music, that can only be a good thing, I guess, you know.
Oh yeah, a lot of people knocked it, but I never did, for that very reason. It's the same with, you know, when people are playing these computer games and they're hearing proper rock music and metal in the background, and if you start listening to it, then to me it's great. There's nothing better, because let's face it, your age, Guy, and my age, and Ian's as well, we always had that. I remember wanting to become a rock singer when I was watching Top of the Pops and the Old Grey Whistle Test. Kids nowadays don't have any access to anything like that that's ever going to make them go, that's Roger Daltrey, I want to be him, like it happened with me. You know what I mean? And all the things, and they just don't get exposure to it because somebody somewhere has deemed it's uncool and it's not what they want to push.
Ian, just a quick question, just taking a quick reality check. I don't know if I'm dreaming. Have Craig and I just been talking about Glee live on air?
I'll edit it out.
That's fine. It's fine.
The thing is, we've been sponsored by CBS to try and make Glee cool again, because they want to relaunch it in Netflix. So there's money in it.
There we go. That's cool.
So obviously, I've seen you at gigs, festivals, and stuff like that. It's like, how did you get involved with the gig scene? I know we finally met at Wildfire this year, which was a pleasure as always. And as I say, we've seen you there. So how did you actually get in touch and work with the festivals? And are you going to be in any festivals next year?
Yeah, I hope to be. I mean, the thing for me, I'll be honest with you, and this is, it's in a way, it's a little bit unbelievable, but it's true, is I started off doing this interview series. I decided from the outset I wanted to do a music show that was interview based, and there's lots of great shows that are about the music, so I thought you didn't need to do another one. And I'm interested in stories anyway, so I thought I want to try and we've done some with King Voodoo, you know, take time out to try and present interviews so anyone who knows nothing about you can get to meet you and then find the music. And that's not better or worse than music shows, but it's just another entry point, isn't it? And the thing is I just went, it literally is for the show. I get the show ready for Friday. The first hour I do on the night. The features are obviously pre-done. They have to be. I have no capabilities to do big live studio sessions. Then I have a weekend off with the family, and then Sunday it's on to the next show. So it is literally, there's no strategy. It's just footstep, you know. And I think the thing is because it's always about doing something different the next week, is things just naturally happen. There's never been a plan. I think the Wildfire thing happened and bless them, I think it's through Massive Wagons. When I did a lot with them in 15 and 16, in the early days, I think it was either Adam or Barry introduced Ted to Dave. We should speak to Guy. He does grassroots music, and I think I was in Superdrug or something in my lunch break, and this Scotsman rang me up, and we got on like a house on fire. We had a lovely chat, and I said, "Well, a bit like what you've done with me tonight. Let's have an interview next week." You know, it's always dangerous with me. Come on the show, and it just kind of evolved, and I went up to Wildfire. I remember in 16, I was quite scared the first year I went, being a bit of a boring Southerner, because I saw the videos. I thought, these are messlers, all going to beat me up, Mr. Boring with my Marks and Spencer's jumper. But I went up to Whiston Lodge, had a beautiful time, some of the nicest people I've met. And again, that's another thing about these grassroots festivals, is how nice and friendly everyone is. And so the next year I said, look, I'm happy to put a few quid in and help sponsor a stage, which we did in 17. And I think the thing with me is, you know, I'm not, you know, I know my place. I know I'm not going to change the world, but I like to be loyal to good people. And I'm not saying I only, you know, there's bad people, but I only know who I know. But if I get to work with someone and I like what they're about, and I can do a little bit to help, then I like to stick with it. And I think loyalty is really important. And again, so the thing with Wildfire, it wasn't planned, but I've always gone back. And, you know, Dave and I have a good relationship, because he's always recommended bands to me. I mean, Bad Touch, for example, back in 15, I mean, never heard of them. So he has introduced me to bands, but also through the show, we've helped, you know, leverage or introduce bands. We sponsored a stage that we help take to Wildfire. So there's no plan for it. It's just we get on and we like working together. And I work with as many people as I can that one person can without falling over, you know, but yeah, so it's not like I prefer Wildfire to another festival that's happening, like Breaking Bands, which I know is a great festival. It's just like, I'm one person, I can have so much time to support so many things. And if there's a positive thing that helps people and helps bands, I'm happy to do what little bit I can to help, you know. And Wildfire, I've been there for about 5 years now. It's great.
Wildfire is personally speaking, it's one of the best festivals, as you said.
I love it.
The atmosphere. However, there is one thing.
The midges.
Did they attack?
They're savage.
I told you before. Listen, as a man that comes from not far away from where that's held, I told you what to do, Ian, but you chose not to listen. I said
they are savage. They are savage.
All you need is Avon Soft as whatever it's called.
Do you know what? It wasn't.
What's a treat?
It like, you know, I used to be a gardener, so it used to be one of those where you know where they are and where not to stand.
Yeah, you're a gardener. You know the lay of the land. Yeah,
you've got a rough idea. So every interview that I did, everyone was going, "Come over here," away from the stage, and I was thinking, "You go by that grass, mate. You'll be lucky to have a coat left." It
was really funny, because actually a funny moment from last summer. I think it was Friday night when Florence Black were headlining, I think, and they were good. But I was doing an interview, I think, with the Bad Day Blues Band, I think, and the schedules had fallen. It was 8 o'clock, and I thought, we promised an interview, got to do one. Not going to compete with Florence Black, so quick 50 minutes and then back in the tent. So I said, you know, we're going to have to get away from the tent, or you won't hear anything. So I said, let's just walk down the drive and go and just stand on the grass. You know, and I'd been to Wildfire 5 years. I know there's a thing about midges, but they're okay. And honestly, it was like Invasion of the Soldier Ants. We got absolutely, we actually could hear it on the outtakes. We were swearing. We couldn't do the interview. We were being eaten alive. But all these eccentric things, you know, and I'll be the first to say I'm not knowledgeable on some of the other events. There's so many grassroots events that go on, but I know you're both involved in a number of them. It's also part of the charm, isn't it, of this grassroots scene? Is they're all slightly eccentric. They've all got slightly different facets, and it gives them all these events different personalities, and that's part of what makes the weekends fun, isn't it?
100%, yeah.
You know. But do you know what? Like I say, the Wildfire, Rockin the Bowl, Breaking Bands.
Yeah, they're all great.
RockWich.
Do you know what? RockWich, the ones like, you know, I can't fault them. The
Yeah.
attitude, the people there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lovely family. It's a lovely experience. It's one of the best. And I've said this to John, like, you know what I mean, that the best experience of a band could have
Yeah.
is just being at these festivals and people looking up to you. And don't get me wrong, you feel like a proper rock star. And I know that sounds daft coming from myself, like, and stuff like that, but you do feel like the way people treat you, they love it. They
Well, the
love
thing
the music. They're there for the music. They're there to support fans, and it's like you say, it's just one of the best feelings going.
And your set, you're setting this up, but I'll say your set was ace at Wildfire, really good. And my only slight quibble with it was I was just taking a quick coffee break down at the tent because I was giving all these CDs out to people that turned up. So and I thought I've got 5 minutes. I'll go and see King Voodoo. And you broke into Tie Your Mother Down, and you didn't give me any advance warning you're going to play it. And watching me trying to run anyway into a tent, and people say, "Oh, guys, out of the way! Queen's on, out of the way!" But no, your set was superb. Your set was absolutely superb, and your singer, boy, he's got a pair of lungs on him.
He's a good guy.
He can sing. Guy. He can sing. Yeah.
Anyway, that's enough about.
That's your plug. That's your plug for King Voodoo. That's your plug for King Voodoo. Anyway,
John, ask him a bloody question, will you? Because you're making me got a big head now.
So, Guy, I mean, in the music industry, how many different things have you done actually? Has it always been radio, or what have you actually done? You know, have you had a career in music?
No. I got a kind of marketing job outside, which I keep very separate. It's just been the Friday show. I'm completely unmusical. I used to play the trombone at school. I was in a school jazz band. I got booed off the stage at the age of 13 because when there's 8 of you on stage, there's no hiding from the fact you don't know what you're doing. For me, it was funny. I grew up loving rock music as a kid, and then the thing that was funny for me is when I got to about 30, I had a bit of a change. I got married, which was beautiful, but also in my early 30s, I got quite ill, and it was nothing sort of life-threatening, but I had a condition, and basically I lost my balance, and my sight pretty much went. I was on these big dilating things. I couldn't see anything, so I was flat on my back for about 3-4 months, and it was fine, but it was a journey. We all have these things in our life, unexpected. And the thing I found, I remember that time when you've got time on your hands, it's like lockdown, I couldn't do anything, couldn't read anything, is I suddenly found all the rock music I liked, like Pink Floyd and Marillion and all these bands and Guns N' Roses. They actually just gave me a bit of a headache because it wasn't, so I started journeying off into jazz and classical music. My dad started selling me piano music because I was in a certain place where I had hours of stuff. So what happened is I drifted away from rock. And I got better and everything was fine, and we had children and life was beautiful, but I just drifted away from it. And I suppose there was a thing, being a boy of the 80s, as I've grown up on bands like Thunder and Toto and Little Angels and all these great bands from the 80s and Marillion. And, you know, the classic rock thing had come in then, hadn't it, in the 90s, where it was for people like us to keep in touch with bands we liked from that weren't no longer on Radio 1. And I suppose for me, there was just a sense in my 30s, like I'm just holding on to old music that I liked when I was 18. So without anything planned, a footstep became a footstep and I drifted away. And then I suppose for about 14 years, I just completely lost touch with the rock scene completely. And it was through this radio show where I stopped when this producer said you should do rock. And then I set up Great Music Stories as a separate entity to that, because it's almost like a pro bono production company, because I knew to do the interviews I had to work outside the radio station because they had no resources, so I kind of funded it myself. And my first reaction when I came back to rock in January 2015 is, I'm not being rude, oh, nothing's changed, you know, they're still playing the bands when I was 30. And that's for me why the power and the magic of discovering bands like Massive Wagons and Those Damn Crows and bands who have since split up, like the Texas Flood, and so many other bands, Gasoline Outlaws, Baleful Creed, the list goes on. You know, the list is endless. Eventually King Voodoo. Why it became so exciting, because it's like these aren't just bands playing old music. These are bands starting a new chapter. And so it was almost by accident I came back. And I think because I'd been away, it was almost like rediscovering a passion, but a passion with a new generation of artists. And the nicest thing I can say about when I look at bands now, like Unknown Refuge, lovely bunch of lads, is they make me feel old. And I think that's good, because it isn't just nostalgic classic rock. There's bands doing exciting things. So my whole journey in this has been an accident, but I've just developed a real belief in the, when I call it the scene, it's the bands first and foremost, but I've been really fortunate through the show to have listeners who've tuned in for years, and I've got to meet people. I mean, this scene has some of the best fans there are.
Yeah.
I mean, and you see some of them at festivals. To your point, Ian, you go to Wildfire or Breaking Bands or whichever one, or Rocking the Bowl. These people turn up. They turn up every year, and they're friendly and they're nice and they're supportive. And it's the one thing we all have in common is the music. And so when you get the taste of it, you can't really let go. So I've rambled off course a bit, but no, I don't have a music background. I can't play in a band. My only claim to fame, which is a joke, is the rock xylophone. It's about as musical as I get. And for that, many people would take restraining orders out on me, and so be it, you know.
So I've got a question for you, because obviously I like the way you conduct your interviews. I really do. Like, you know, I mean, you get the best out of the bands. Who are the quiet ones in the band as well, and you try and get them involved, which I think is key. One thing I'd love to ask is, what would you advise up and coming bands who are going to be interviewed? The pros and cons of being yourself and coming out your shell to like, you know, and what would you recommend them to do?
I think, yeah, really good question, Ian. I'm just going to do a rare thing and think before I speak. I think what I try and do when I do interviews is I try and get to the real people. And I think we did it with you at Wildfire. I thought that interview with the band was beautiful. So my job as an interviewer is to work hard to get the listener in front of the real people. And sometimes when they've got the crib sheets or tour dates and talking about organic processes and being humble and all these kind of lines, you're just meeting the PR company. And so I think there's a real good thing for young bands to be themselves. I think I mean, Unknown Refuge in our Band of the Year last week, they came 5th out of 183 bands. That was nothing to do with Facebook spam voting. That was listeners who have taken these boys to their hearts because they are themselves, you know. So I think be true. I think it's also quite important for young musicians. One thing I would say is to care about the issues going on in the world. I mean, something I certainly find with my kids, my eldest in particular, is, you know, we are relying on this new young generation to put right some of the wrongs in the world. They're the ones advocating on climate change and on the wealth divide, on mental health and on gender and on race and on such important issues we got to fix. And the thing I noticed looking at young people and getting gigs and my daughter's community is they really care about some of these world issues, maybe more than I did as a teenager. It was just going down the pub and having a good time. So I'm not saying that bands should be militant, but if bands care about issues in the community they're working on, or mental health issues, or things that they care about, you know, let listeners get to meet you as a person and what you care about, because I think that is the way to build a connection. So I think that's important. The other thing I would say to young bands, and I've kind of thought this a lot, is I remember I gave a talk down at Waterbury College about 6 years ago, and I was talking to these young students and bands, and I just said to them all, just get off the social media for 5 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of people on social media, but also there's a lot of people, I mean, more than half my listeners aren't even on social media when I get the numbers and the stuff. I've learned that over the years. There is a world beyond it. But spend some time in your community getting to know your audience, not just the hardcore fan base on Facebook, but if you're a young band and you want to set up, you know, you've got local community stations that have all got rock shows, go and meet them. go into the station and go and meet them. You know, if you've got a local paper and there's a music writer, ring them up and say, can I come have a look around the paper and get to understand how you work? People love that kind of flattery. If there are colleges in your town, go into the student bar and talk to them and say, what do you like to doing for gigs and what kind of music and where do people go? And I think too much of it with young bands now is all about social media, social media, social media. And I think there's no substitute. I would say this as an old bloke, but I noticed a firm I worked at in London years ago, someone said, and they were true, is that these young people, they don't use phones anymore to speak. They just type all the time. And I'm not, that sounds really ageist, but I think what I'm saying is for young bands is more generally is do real, you know, try and get a audience in your hometown, try and build up a local base and then connect and network with other bands, put little local tours together, work with venues, work with local record shops, but spend a lot of time listening to people, spending time asking questions. So rather than saying, you know, local independent record shop, will you stock our stuff? Go in, buy a record, get to know them and say, what do we need to do to get young, exciting bands in this record shop? And if you ask questions, you'll get answers. And I think the answers are all there, but I think young bands have got to look beyond social media.
I think the big thing is.
So is that a rambling answer?
No. And it brings me on to a point that I've noticed. And I was having a conversation at the corporation in Sheffield a few weeks ago because we were doing a promotion there, and I was talking to Connor, who was the manager, and he's also the singer with Shadow Smile. And I interviewed him last week. He was on Sunday, and I went into one of the club nights. Now this is a rock metal club night.
Yeah.
Walks in, and what I saw bore no relation to what I can remember.
Right.
Back in my day, because we were all out there. We were extrovert. Yeah. These kids, these young people are so introverted because they spend most of their time, a lot of them students, and they're probably staying away from home. They're in their student rooms, you know, halls of residence, whatever. And I said to Connor, and Connor says, you do realise, John, he says, that most of these people will spend all week in their room on their phone and TikTok.
Yeah.
And this is a key element, this, because
what
we're talking about here is what the metal and the rock industry is guilty of is keep doing the same old stuff in the same old way and waking up and waiting, and these kids waking up and smelling the coffee and realizing we're right all along. Well, these people are not, they haven't been brought up the same way as us. They don't look at things the same way as us, and we have to reach them. Yeah. If we really want to make a difference. It's like you said, Guy, and I think one of the big movements coming up in the next 12 months will be away from classic rock to a degree, because as long as classic rock are not singing about things that matter and actual things that people are interested in about the world, like you just said, and they're singing about getting drunk or partying or riding motorbikes or whatever, these young people are never going to clock onto them. They need to be a bit more woke than that. And I hate to use the word because it's everybody sees it as negative, but it isn't. You said it. It's just how these people, and they are right to care about the things they care about. And I actually think that bands that say things that actually matter are going to get noticed. And I think a lot of the people that listen to music now that's young, that's just a background noise, and that's what a lot of the music is, so it doesn't need to have any depth, are going to start looking for things with depth because everything else in their life has.
I mean, something I've banged on about, and my big thing's physical music. We'll save that for later, but part of that. But one of the big things that I've talked about since about 2016 on the show, and it doesn't matter what I think, because I'm just a little pebble in the pond, but and this is really about my understanding coming back to music and what I think the great things are and what the enormous barriers are for this genre we love. Is I said on air back in 2016, I said, the best thing we can do to help ourselves, if you want to help these bands, is to stop talking about classic rock. Because from what I remember in the 80s, it was just called rock. It's a retrospective name that was invented after these bands were no longer on Radio 1. It was like classic cars. It's like a heritage thing. And I said, why don't we start calling it modern rock, i.e. today's rock? And And that requires us then starting a conversation of what do we need to do with young bands to help them be relevant to society and younger audiences today. And that discussion needs to happen. And don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking classic rock. Most of my records indoors and my CDs are all from the 70s and 80s. And there will always be an influence of every generation onto the next. So we're not saying it's bad music. We love classic rock, but we're saying to new bands, don't imitate the old bands, draw the influence, but recast rock as something that's relevant to the world in 2020 when we've got enormous issues. And I think for young people, they've got to feel that these bands, I had a chat about this with Unknown Refuge 6 months ago, because they're young kids. I said, the kids that you grow up with, they've got to see you as relevant to their world. You can't, if you start putting big hats and having big beards and talking in sometimes having lyrics which sometimes are misogynistic and of a different age, you're just going to alienate yourself. But how do we take the essence of what the beauty and the rebelliousness and whatever of rock and roll is, but make it relevant to 2021? Because you know what thing that I believe is we need rock and roll today. We need rebels. We need people to protest. You think about things in the past like the poll tax and Thatcher and all the things in the past where we needed music, in Vietnam, where we needed music to stand tall. We've never needed rock to stand tall more than we do today with some of the issues in the world. But we don't need bands pretending they're from the 70s. And I think we need to have a conversation across all the people that love this scene. It's just to ask the question, if we're gonna have a new chapter for rock and call it modern rock that is new and relevant to today, what does modern mean? And I'm not saying I know the answers, but let's start this conversation and let's be happy to put the 70s clothes back in the dressing up box, and let's start thinking about modern relevant, Ian, for you in Liverpool, beautiful city, great heritage, again, lots of issues, lots of social issues. How do we make rock relevant to what the city needs today? And I think if we do that, we'll suddenly find these bands are back in the music mainstream again.
I think the other thing that I like as well is that you see these young bands now, and we've talked a lot about Unknown Refuge, but we all know them.
So they've had a few,
and they don't look like a metal band.
Yeah,
they've all got short hair. They don't dress like that. Shadow Smile don't dress like a metal band. They're not. They play the music they love, and they don't get hung up on the fripperies. Yeah, I think that's key as well.
Yeah,
you don't need to fit in a box.
Just be you. Yeah, and actually another. I think another one of your bands, Craig. But actually, and don't be upset, Ian. But the band that actually made relatively from at the base to where I came out, the biggest impression on me at Wildfire was Late Night Legacy. They opened the festival, and that's a tough gig, opening a festival. And I liked them, and the music was a bit different. You couldn't fit them in a neat box. The way they dressed, the way they sounded, the music, it was just different, and it made an impression on me. And the biggest compliment I can give them is by the time I left Wildfire on Sunday night, having seen 50 odd bands, is they were still in my top 5. And that's quite a compliment, because by then you've had all the big bands come through. But the thing that appealed to me about them is I think they were absolutely themselves, and they weren't trying to be someone else. They're a work in progress. They would be the first to say they're trying to find their sound and evolve where they're going, but they want to go on that journey. And I thought they were really fresh. And
I think that was the first gig, because 50% of the band left.
Yeah, that's right.
In 2020. So that I think, and the sound now is different again. But you're right, and I've said this to Ian. I've seen Ian's band playing, and he would say, we seem to draw a bigger crowd than some of the bands that I would expect at festivals. And I say, you know why? Because you don't sound the same as 80% of the rest of the festival. When the classic rock bands, as they're now called, when they're so similar, all of a sudden, if you sound a little bit different to that, people are noticing, and I don't think it's a bad thing. And again, I'm not knocking any band. I'm just saying that That's interesting.
But going back to the very start, so I mentioned Queen at the very start, but the thing that they've got, and it's the same with the Beatles, it's the same with lots of bands, is you put on a Queen record, it can only be a Queen record. Whether you love them or hate them, it can only be Queen. And I think the same is probably true of the Beatles. I think probably the same is probably true of Billy Joel. I think there's a number of other ones. But again, it's that I sometimes fear, and again, I'm no expert on this, but from what I see coming through, is sometimes there seems to be impression that a lot of young bands, they're focusing a lot on the marketing, and actually it's got to be about songs. Yeah. I would say that I'm a radio guy, but for me, it's 100% about the songs. But again, I think to your point, you just really referenced it, Craig, is helping bands find a unique sound that is original to them. Well, that's the start of a journey of being different, isn't it? And standing out. Yeah,
100%. I mean, Ian, your band, I don't think your band sounds like anybody. I really don't, because Jamie's voice isn't a voice that would normally go with the riffs that you spew out, but it's standing you in good stead.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's do you know what, the things that I've always said to bands I've spoken to, up and coming bands, and they've asked us about it, we're still in King Voodoo's still in its infancy. COVID did that to a lot of bands. It made unfortunately, COVID caused a lot of bands to split up.
Yeah.
And it gave us time to reflect in King Voodoo where we want to be, what we want to do, and stuff like that. Yeah. And we made some changes, blah, blah, blah. And what I've said to everyone of all the other bands who come through is, if it's right. If something's not clicking in that band, you need to make the adjustments to make it work. Because otherwise, you'll be 2 years down the line, you'll be regretting it, why you didn't make a change when you should have. And then everyone will just get fed up with it. They'll go their own way and stuff like that. And you've just got to feel, I hate to say this, and it's a bit cliche, but it's one of them where you've got to follow your heart a little bit. And you've got to actually make decisions that some people don't like.
In fact, I would go as far as to say that sometimes it's in your heart to start with, but your head has to come in, and the heart can hold you back because it can hold you back from making the tough decisions. And you know this, Ian, better than most, and I certainly do with the times when I was in bands. I've had to get rid of some of my best mates out of bands because they no longer shared the same passion, or I had a different vision from them, or whatever. But you have to do it because, quite frankly, if you keep flogging the dead horse, it's not going to get any more alive and start cantering anytime soon. And that's the problem.
I guess there's a thing, and again, I know nothing about music apart from this little beauty down here, but but I guess the thing about being in a band is it's got to be a living, breathing organism. You've got to evolve. You've got to have a hunger to do things. It isn't just turning up to gigs playing the same 8 songs. I guess there's that thing which is, musicians, like anything creative, you've got to evolve and grow, and that sometimes means you've got to test and you've got to make hard decisions.
It's also a family. I think you've got to be able to. I know it sounds daft. Like I said to you, there's a lot of cliches within the music industry side of things where it's like, and your bands like your Revival Blacks, your Collaterals, and stuff like that. You talk to them when they're on the road. They're all together. They're all friendly. They're all pally and stuff like that. And you can see that when they're on stage because it bleeds into that stage performance. Yeah. And what I've always said to bands is, follow your heart. If you know it's right, you've got to be able to take criticism as well. And if you know it's right, it's right. If you come off stage and someone says to you, guys, that didn't really work, you need to make a couple of changes, you know what I mean? And if you can't take that criticism,
you're in the wrong game, or you're doomed to failure.
It's like if I, as the lads will know, I'm a moany ass bastard, you know what I mean? And I'll be the first one to come off stage and go, didn't like this, didn't like that, blah, 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 blah. But we can change that. We can make changes to the show and stuff. And you know what? We had an interview with Michael Starr from Steel Panther. And it was so refreshing to hear him say at the start of the gig, before the gig even starts, we have a 30 minutes, we have a powwow, we tell how our day's going. And at the end of the gig, we have 10 minutes where we say what worked, what didn't. I thought, that's good. That's what I've been doing with the guys. And to be honest, I've even incorporated before the gig, we just have a little get together away from everyone. And we did it at the last gig, John, and Hard Rock Hell. And you know what? It put everyone in that. Just gives us a little peace of mind.
And I think also, I think also, Ian, as well, and I'm not going to mention any bands. I'm not going to mention Unknown Refuge again. They've had 15 name checks tonight, but good ones. But I also think, I mean, just thinking of myself just as a bloke, as a music fan that goes to as many gigs as I can in between being a dad and all this sort of stuff, is when you're watching a band, particularly in a small club, you can tell when the band get on. You know, you can tell. I remember there's a band that were doing a gig for me about 2 years ago for something I was doing. And I kind of had a sense they were probably going to split up, and you could feel it on stage. You could feel the vibe wasn't there. And I think what you're saying, Ian, it's not just about good morale. It's part of the performance. If you can communicate, if you can share, if you can be open, if you can be together, then when you're on stage, the chemistry between the band, which is part of the show, it isn't just about the music. You're watching how the drums and about the language and body language. That's part of the show. And I think that the togetherness plays that little bit of X factor that makes a good show an excellent show.
I think you're spot on, and I think it's no different to what happens in sport. So you've got the England team in the World Cup finals, and they bring in some of the old boys that won the World Cup in '66 to talk about what it felt like for them, or whether it's the Ryder Cup and they bring in some of the old boys, it's what it felt for them. You know, it's so important. And I think Michael actually said as well, the other thing is, maybe one of the members of the band's not having a great day for whatever reason, and you're oblivious to that. So you're locked onto, I'm fine, I'm doing great here. But even if you find that out, you can then remind them of when you're talking about, and they hear the other guys that are a bit more up that day about what they feel like this gig. And again, it's teamwork, it's team building.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, I think, because time is running on. So what I would like to do is, I'd like to go into your specialist subject, Guy. Now, I remember when I started doing my radio show, somebody said to me, because I go out on a Friday night at 7. Although I do tell everybody to listen at night again on Sunday.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
And the thing is, I said, people said to me, well, you do interviews, so why don't you do interviews in the show? And I said, because somebody else does it better than me, and it's better that way. And I just want to play music. I says, I do this talking on this, Scouser and Scot. I says, so I don't want to be the same thing. Now, if there's anybody watching this who may be thinking about, I'd like to do radio show and do interviews with bands like you do, Guy. Can you give them some top tips?
Wow, that's a big one. Because I don't actually think about what I do. It's kind of very intuitive. I think the thing that I think the things that I have tried to do with my little show on a Friday is, the first thing is I try and leave the rock fan outside, and I try and do a good show. So you'll probably get this, Ian, when you're doing a gig, it's about putting on a good show. So if I just came in and was a besotted rock fan playing my favorite tunes, probably no one would find it very interesting. So I've always been looking at how to make it entertaining and interesting, and bands have to be part of that. So the bands that do well on the show are bands who open up, and I've found that the more interesting, it doesn't have to be being funny, it can be being dead serious, but no one really wants to, in my view, turn on to listen to Guy B reading out tour dates and talking about new releases and reading out press releases. So you've got to make it interesting. You've got to do something Spotify can't do. So I think the first thing is to make it interesting. I think the second thing is also doing a show. I think the thing is as well is be brave. When I remember in 2015 when I started doing my show, when PRs knew I was doing a show, I got all these press releases through from bands who were big bands on big radio stations or magazines, and they were the safe bets. And I remember I went off and I met Massive Wagons at Euston. This was before they blew up. And I thought, I think they're a bit loud for my show. Even my rock show, they're a bit loud. And but I went with it, and I put something. I was brave to myself to put something out. It was all like Red Dress and Fight the System and these big loud songs. And I was playing sort of, not quite Chris Rea, but a bit safer rock. And the reaction was electric. So I think be brave. I think be original. And I think it's the same lesson as you've talked very wisely about, Craig and Ian, about bands, is don't be the same as everyone. We don't need lots of people doing the same thing. So I know the show that I do on Fridays is in some ways Marmite, because some people don't like the xylophone, they don't like me being silly and being whatever, but that's fine, because there's lots of shows that do something else. And I think the way we all contribute as bricks in the wall to make this scene vibrant and rich is to really stress the diversity. So I think the thing for anyone doing a show is actually don't listen to my show or your show, Craig, or someone else's show, is kind of think, what's missing? And it's the same as the band doing a show that's different, and I'll probably be the first one listening to it, because we all want something different. And I think the thing I'm probably proudest of from 7 years now, gone about 3 weeks away from 7 years doing this thing, is we've got quite a lot of listeners who tune in. You never quite know how many, but from feedback, I know all through the show we have had people who are not rock fans who have sent me an email, maybe on a Saturday after the show, saying, "Oh, I heard that band Fire Road, or I heard that band this, or I won't say Unknown Refuge, Late Night Legacy, or JFK Blue. Don't know anything about rock, but I like the song, and I'm going to go and buy an album." And you kind of think that's why you do it.
Yeah, exactly. I say that all the time in mine. I say, right, I'm not going to sit here and tell you, break down the musical input of the band and where they, where they've got their roots and all that. I'm going to tell you briefly who they are, a little bit, if I know, a little bit about them. And then I say, go on my social media, because I tag every band.
Go and find them.
Times a week. Go find them and find out yourself, make your own mind up. And more importantly, go and buy their merch. And I'm quite blatant about it. That's the only reason I do it.
Yeah. And I think so. Sorry, that was a really probably waffly answer, because I think, one thing I have, and I don't know if you have it, I think you're probably, as a businessman, you kind of know exactly where Forge is going. But I think, and probably Ian, you have it as a band, is because we are still slightly on the outskirts of mainstream music. I think we all have questioning moments where we think, are we making a difference? Is it actually helping? Is it bringing new people in? And I think the thing I would say to anyone thinking of doing a radio show, be original, get it back to the people, cut through the PR, but also have some fight. Because I think the thing that the three of us have in common here tonight, and most of the people watching your podcast, is if you believe in this music, we're all going to have to fight for it.
100%.
Yeah.
100%, mate. You couldn't put it, nobody could have put that better.
And do you know what? I think that is a perfect way to end the show.
Oh, it's been lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Guy, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And I really mean this. We'd love you to have you back on again. Right. I would love to have another show with you if you'd be up for it. But before we'll
do it at Wildfire.
Actually, the next thing is have you two on my show.
We would love to.
Well,
do you know what?
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll interview you two. I've not been interviewed for years. It's quite strange.
But before we go, the cheeky Scouser always has one question.
Come on, cheeky.
One last one. Give us your links to your show. Give us your links to your webpage, Facebook, and stuff like that. And I'm putting you on the spot.
Well, now it's all locked down. It's all just greatmusicstories.com. You'll find the reviews, the web links. I'm on Alexa as well. Twitter, Guy_B_rock show. And one of the few people in the rock scene, I don't really do much on Facebook.
Do you know what? It's fine, because I've got all your links down here anyway. So what I'll do, guys, if you are watching this, please click the links down below.
Yeah.
Check out Guy.
Thank you, guys.
Tune in onto his show. And I mean this, reach out to him. He's one of the nicest guys in the rock scene. And from the bottom of my heart, mate, thank you very much for the support that you've given, not only myself, but all the other bands out there. So thank you very much. John.
Thank you, guys.
Keep fighting the good fight, mate. That's what I say. But there you go, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sure you've enjoyed that as much as we did. And because this is one great guy right here. So until next time, hit that cowbell and subscribe.